Hello, creative people. Thanks for tuning into Melody or Witchcraft. I'm your host, Catherine Petricelli. On the podcast, we hear a poet read a work of their own and an Emily Dickinson poem of their choosing that contributed to their work. We discuss poetry, Dickinson, the fluidity of time, and the scope and sources of creative inspiration. The past is such a curious creature, Dickinson wrote. Join us to find out how it can teach us about our now.
You know how dreary to be.
They shut me up in Prose, as when a little girl, they put me in the closet, because they liked me still could themselves have peeped, and seen my brain go round. They might as wise have lodged a bird for treason in the pound. Himself has but to will, and easy as a star, look down upon captivity and laugh. No more have I.
That was Jane Wong reading Emily Dickinson. Jane Wong is the author of the memoir Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City, Tin House 2023. She also wrote two poetry collections, How to Not Be Afraid of Everything, Alice James 2021, and Overpour, Action Books 2016. Her poetry installations, which engage haunting and nourishment, have been exhibited at the Frye Art Museum, the Richmond Art Gallery, and the Asian Art Museum. Hi, Jane. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm so excited to talk to you, Catherine, about Emily Dickinson and beyond. I love this poem, so I'm so excited to chat.
So yeah, this poem for me, it is her unboundable creative spirit and nature and her awareness of that.
Yes, that absolute unabashed joy, I think, in her creative spirit, which is always within her, and the kind of acknowledgement and understanding that the world might not look kindly upon it. I think too, there is a sense of like being put in the closet, or like they liked me still, not moving, but she's moving. Her brain, her heart, everything about her is moving. So absolutely. Yeah. And I love the ending, and laugh no more have I. That laugh to me feels so much kind of like she's just like, well, even if you don't get me, I get myself. There's that quality. Yes.
Yeah, it's like a self-companionship, or yeah, as I'm hearing you talk about it, that's really inspiring when I think about it. I also, this poem has one of her exclamation points. Right?
Yes.
That second still.
Still.
I'm thinking of how we often talk about forms like the sonnet containing strong emotion, and that searing grief or that boundless love is kind of bouncing off the parameters of the form. And here we have the neat quatrains, right? The 4-line stanzas, and we have her very steady ballad meter. Is there something in the craft of this poem, besides its personality that we've been talking about, that you admire in Dickinson that shows up particularly here?
That double still always gets me. I feel like, as you're mentioning, because they liked me still in quotation marks, but then we have that extra still with the exclamation point. We can read that doubled, right? In the sense of like still not moving. They because they liked me still not moving. And then still meaning like they still are insisting me to not move. And so really you haven't like let me just be me, even as an adult. Because, as when a little girl, for me, that kind of emphasis via her craft is so central to me as a poet. I mean, even looking at the line, they might as wise have lodged a bird. We hear they might as well have lodged a bird, but they might as wise. What? I think she's playing with us. And I think that if you don't look close enough, you might kind of like mishear something, or something's definitely not what it seems. I often, whenever I teach Dickinson, I always teach her letters to Higginson because it reveals a little bit about her own kind of struggles through what it means to be understood. And I think in part her own kind of wink of you may not ever understand me, and that's okay. There's this one quote from her letters where she writes, I had no monarch in my life and cannot rule myself. And when I try to organize, my little force explodes. And I love that because it's like, in some ways she's asking him to help her organize or like edit her poems. But at the same time, she's like, you can't edit me actually because my little force explodes and cannot rule myself. She says, I think you called me wayward. Like, I love that word. So, and knowing very well that she is wayward. And that to me is like a central part of Dickinson that I feel very tied to my own kind of sensibility as a poet.
Mm.
Yeah, totally wayward. Totally wayward.
Well, I can't wait to get to your poem, but I've got so much else to ask first. Just to make sure that everybody is with us, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, one of Dickinson's posthumous editors, a lifelong correspondent. She first writes to him in April of 1862. The letter that you're referring to is from a few months after that, that same year. And Higginson, of course, has been mentioned numerous times prior in the podcast, but kind of in passing. And so it is an opportunity, since you were interested in this quote, to talk a little bit more about their relationship and about his role. What do you think his role is primarily? How would you characterize it for her? Because she says she wants a teacher,
Yes.
ostensibly.
I think it's a really kind of funny relationship because, yeah, she says she wants a teacher. She understands, I guess, his like editorial eye. But at the same time, I think there are so many moments in the letters that she writes to him in her replies when I see something like, I think you called me wayward. She's kind of trying to kind of constantly push back, I think, on his suggestions or what he's trying to kind of quote unquote help her through or do. What often happens are these like little like I don't know even know what to call them exactly, little pokes at him, letting him know that she actually can't change her work. When she says, I cannot rule myself, and when I try to organize, my little force explodes, like she can't necessarily make whatever he's suggesting, like move her meter or move her. I feel like she has a kind of playful relationship with him because on one hand, he might be thinking that he's, has a quote unquote student that's like needing help. And in fact, she's like, I actually don't need help at all. In fact, I might be actually helping you. Trying to kind of like broaden your sense of what poetic possibility might look like. And there's just like, funny moments in the letters where she'll write like my friend, period. And just knowing like text speech today, like a period in like a text would be like heartbreak. And so obviously it's not contemporary, but my friend, period, I think she's totally like winking and being like, maybe he sent her a letter that week that was like a little harsher potentially on her poetry.
Thanks for the surgery was one of my favorite lines, right?
Yes,
Thanks for the surgery. And then she
right.
goes and does whatever she wants to do. Yeah. I mean, Higginson was considered in his time quite progressive,
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
progressive, a radical abolitionist.
Hmm.
But if you read his words when he's
Hmm.
writing about his troops, they're cringeworthy.
Yeah.
And then he is also said to be a proponent of women's rights, again, for his time, but by today's standards,
Right. Yeah.
it's a little squirmy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think in many ways, that's how I feel like Dickinson's like out of time. Like she doesn't, even during that time, if people were seeing him as quote unquote progressive, she almost was like, no, it's not enough. It's not enough, right? That there is a kind of continual pushback that she has. And that she's like doing that even, the fact that she's even pushing back in the ways that she does. Yeah, like the thank you for the surgery or kind of like just like these tiny little digs. I can't remember, I'm paraphrasing, but there's another moment. Your letter did not make me drunk. Had
Oh,
rum before or
yeah.
something like that. Like she's almost kind of, your letter wasn't that
It
interesting
wasn't
to
all that
me.
in a bag of
Yes.
chips, homeboy. Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
I know.
Sometimes like I look at this poem that I read and it's just this shut me up in prose. I think as somebody who writes memoir, I think poets who write memoir definitely have shaken up the world of prose, so to speak. But for her, even in her letters, she writes just like she does in her poems. And so she can't even separate, I think, her existence in the world, even in regular life, how you speak
Hmm.
colloquially, from her poetry. So she embodies full poet all the time, capital P.
Right. And of course, she famously said to Susan, her sister in law, "We are the only poets and everyone else is prose."
Hmm.
I always forget if it's letter poem or poem letter. Susan
Mm,
called them something.
mm.
Do you think it's a lifelong journey to kind of establish and reestablish and remember for ourselves the power of who we are, the power of what we have chosen or what has chosen us
Mm, mm.
as writers, as women, as whoever we are, really? Is that an unending task?
That's such a great question. I do feel like it is a kind of never-ending task. I mean, I only write during the summers, and I feel like during the academic year, I gather all these pieces, and by the time I get to June, I totally forget how to write, or I think I do. It's like beginner's mind again. Like I don't know what I'm doing. In some ways, I have to convince my own self that there is this kind of core and that I can try to quote unquote organize or try to have like a plan moving ahead. Oh, I'm going to work on this project that does XYZ, but in reality, like I just end up writing about the thing that's on my mind right now. It's almost like, a year had passed between the next heart space of what I'm kind of moving through. And I have to convince myself again and again that I am a poet. And so it's very odd to think that one has to do that in one's own personal practice, like again and again, like being like, I think I know how to do this thing, question mark, but also exclamation mark, like you do and you don't know. And then having to say that to people and actually have to say, like, yeah, I think I know this is my style and it can't quite change. I can challenge myself, but this is what is the core of me. And so it's like twofold. It's definitely like convincing yourself internally in the act of writing, but also externally with critics, with editors, with readers, with whoever might be wanting to kind of organize you or put you in prose. Yeah, it's
Mm.
always going to be this. And at least for me, especially as a poet of color, like a woman poet of color, I feel like there's always going to be this expectation of what I'm supposed to write against like what I actually am writing. And that will
Hmm.
be always. And I'm hyper aware of that. So I think the hyper awareness of it makes you want to push back and play with their expectations. I think that's what I love
Mm.
about Dickinson is that she's playing with what we think she's supposed to do and having kind of fun with it. I think that there's a lot of radical resistance in that, or at least to like, what do? You get mad by writing something real good.
Ooh, I love it. I
Mhm.
love it. Do you have a critique group or like a peer group that you go to again and again?
I don't know if I would call it a critique group, but I have for the last like, oh my gosh, nearly 10 years, 15 years, a few friends of mine who are poets. We have something called cut and paste, where we actually, in a very gigantic Google thread, cut and paste whatever we've written, no explanation, not even finished pieces. It's just like, here, I wrote two couplets today, throw it in cut and paste. And the idea is that whoever's on the other side, and indeed, one of my friends that I think at the time lived in Seoul would just like read it and hold it. And one of the rules of cut and paste is actually that we don't give feedback and that we just read it and hold it. And if we really need to text each other and say something, we can. But it to me is like a kind of a nod of kinship and connection and like know that I know that you're writing. And because you wrote, I better put something in cut and paste too. It is like an
Ah.
accountability aspect too, but it's also like no one gets to see your rawest drafts, right? And so, especially when I see my friends in that group do a poetry reading and they say, "Oh, this is a brand new poem. No one's ever seen it." I was like, "I've seen it because it's in cut and paste." So I love that practice because it also loosens the intensity of first reader feedback kind of part. So that's kind of what I do. Yep, cut and paste.
I have one more question before we dive into your work. Because I feel like this bleeds into your poem. There is such drama, and I use that word in the most positive sense in Dickinson. Her emotion, which, we've already talked about, kind of bouncing around on the page in just this one poem. This is an unanswerable question, but I'm wondering about emotion's role in the world we are currently in. Certainly in Dickinson's time, we can only imagine what that was like because the tighter the reins, the less it takes to knock things off center, right? And that was definitely a very prescribed, regulated time. And so is ours in very different ways. Where does emotion fit? How do we organize it? I guess if we go back to that in a space that prides itself on self sufficiency and productivity and patriarchy and all of those things.
Mm. Wow. I love that you said it's an unanswerable question, and it's so true. But I think, that question of emotion, I was just teaching just this week Lorca's essay on duende. Each week we have like a craft focus, so lineation, enjambment, or we'll look at metaphors, etc. I was joking with them, I was like, this week's focus is emotion, but I can't teach you how to feel. Like, I can't teach you anything. In fact, we can't call upon emotion. We can't call upon duende. It comes for us in some ways. And we have to kind of allow that quote unquote struggle, that power in through us, from the soles of the feet out of our mouths. And I think part of that is like discomfort, basically unease. Emotion's not a place where I think a lot of people like to sit. And it's that kind of moment of screaming rage. It is the like snot dribbling out of your nose when you're having the ugly cry, when there's so much grief you can't do anything but have guttural noise. Also, in thinking about emotion, to be so in love that your eyes kind of feel like, falling out of your eyeballs. Like, I don't know, there is such intensity, I think, in emotion that is kind of ugly. And I think that we don't, as a society, look upon it with grace. There's like, ooh, like nobody wants to look at the girl bawling her eyes out at the airport. Just turn away, like keep walking. If people are fighting, having an argument in the street, just turn away, look away. Anything that is too much. Right. It's like the opposite of like, because they like me still, it is emotion moves. It is its own creature. It's hot. It wants things in my personal life as well as I think my poetry life, I've been told many a times that I am too much and that my emotions are too much, overly emotional, or I can't quite harness things in. That makes me wonder, it's like, well, what is the default expectation that we're supposed to hold it all in? And that to me is dangerous to not feel and to not feel fully, right? I think that leads to dehumanization. It leads to so much violence and harm in this world. And so I think the kind of role of the poet is to really funnel that through, express it in a way that feels, hopefully, to people who are reading the poems, like they can allow their emotions to bubble up to the top and boil over. People always ask me, it's like the title of my first book, Overpour, like, what is that? And it's that's the bubbling over. It's the garbage can that's over full and it's like rotting and it's festering. Like that's to me like so important to acknowledge, I think, the times in which the world is too much and how do you speak to that? How do you express that? And demand action and demand change so that it's not too much and that there is a possibility of care and mutual aid and tenderness. And yeah, I think that if we don't express these emotions, so much could be in danger. Yeah, I'll pause there, but I have a lot of feelings about feelings. Yeah, I definitely do. I've always been that like, these terms they use for children too, like, oh, sensitive, a sensitive child. I was just a very angry little girl because the world was like, from a very young age, my familial world also was chaotic. And so of course, I was quote unquote sensitive. All children are sensitive. All adults should be sensitive. I'm afraid of it not being that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that is a beautiful segue into your own poem, if you would do us the honor.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, this poem is called Lessons on Lessening, and it's from my second book of poems, How to Not Be Afraid of Everything, which you can probably tell by the title of that book, thinks through a lot of questions about fear and what we fear. And this poem is actually really thinking about my younger self and how much she knew and what I can learn, I think, from my younger self. I think we always think of knowledge and wisdom as later in life, but what can I learn actually now as an adult from my youngest self?
Great.
Lessons on lessening. I wake to the sounds of my neighbors upstairs as if they are bowling. And maybe they are, all pins and love fallen over. I lie against my floor if only to feel that kind of affection. What I've learned time and again, get up. You cannot have what they have. And the eyes of a dead rat can't say anything. In Jersey, the sink breaks and my mother keeps a bucket underneath to save water for laundry. A trickle of water is no joke. I've learned that. Neither is my father wielding a knife in starlight. I was taught that everything and everyone is self-made, that you can make a window out of anything if you want. This is why I froze insects, to see if they will come back to life. How I began to see each day the swoosh of wings get up, the ants pouring out of the sink onto my arms in dish-heavy water. My arms, branches, a swarm I didn't ask for. No one told me I'd have to learn to be polite, to let myself be consumed for what I cannot control. I must return to my younger self, to wearing my life like heavy wool weaved in my own weight, to pretend not to know when the debtors come to collect.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I have this question written at the bottom of the page that says, will this speaker be consumed by how her nature lives in contrast to family expectation, societal expectation?
Mm-hmm.
And the poem is mostly in couplets, but there are single lines, there are monostitches throughout, and they don't resolve. I thought at first that they did. In other words, I thought there was an even number,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't. They don't
Mm-hmm.
quite. There's an odd number of those. And we start and end on a solo line, which I feel
Mm-hmm.
like is significant to what the poem is saying as well.
Yeah, I wanted to create a kind of irregularity of those kind of like single lines and the couplets and that feeling as if yeah I was resisting that need to organize as we were talking about earlier. Also, just as I realized as I was reading, I read a trickle of water, and it's actually a trick of water. That's what I wrote. And I did it to myself. Like I was just, it's kind of like going back to like the Emily Dickinson poem, like well versus wise, trick versus trickle. And
Yeah.
now I'm confusing myself. It's like, oh, did I do that on purpose? Like I must have.
Your poetic subconscious did it at least.
Exactly. And so it's so funny that there is almost like even reading it out loud, my desire for sense making vocally is
Mhm.
very different from what's my desire to undo syntax on the
Oh, I
page.
love that. Yeah.
So it is this whole poem is like, I mean, I always keep coming back to like that, no one told me I'd have to learn to be polite, to let myself be consumed for what I cannot control. And when you're talking about that, well, will she be consumed? It's there's a grief in knowing that the adult voice here is consumed and what it means to try to like get back to that child mindset of returning to your younger self to be weaved in one's own weight, to be so strong in one's central kind of like imagination. There's still hope, I think, by the end of the poem. Though the speaker, aka myself, has been consumed, like, can she get back to that original core, the self that will kind of like still be there regardless of how thin she is or like whittled down she is. She's still there.
Well, and I think the poem too preserves that younger self. It preserves that innocence. And there is
Hmm.
that gap of knowledge, right? For the speaker now looking back, they know what's happened, they know what's going to happen, which can be definitely a grief, but I think just sort of capturing it on the page is hopeful,
Yeah,
maybe.
I think so. At least in my act of writing it. And it's so funny because I don't usually talk about my poems. I realized I was like, wait, what does that mean? My father wielding a knife in starlight. I just so funny. It's like sometimes these things pour out of you and you're like, what happened to me? That's what I love about poetry, though. There's such bewilderment, absolute bewilderment. But yeah, just like writing that down, having it exist, like saying, like after the kind of like breaking points in my family, right? When my father, who I'm estranged from, left our family, and these moments of like perpetual mm, the hum of violence always in my family's life, and my mom always like trying to like keep things together when she's having that bucket of water to save for laundry.
It's so gutting in a certain way, reading that line. You're like, oh, yep,
Yeah.
yep, I'm related to that person too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And what has changed? Like that's for me, even thinking about this now, it's like my mom still, she's still in that kind of like survival mode or still in the let's just make sure things don't fall apart. Let's just keep the thread. There is definitely a lot of grief, I think, in those kind of like first parts of the poem and the eyes of the dead rat. Oh, here we are. We got some there's rats here again, and so it's kind of funny because like, I wrote a whole memoir and thinking about what it was like to kind of grow up in the restaurant we had and just like growing up, very low income and in this kind of, chaotic family situation. But I had to like do that for many pages. And then in a small little poem, you've got the same, it's like a mini memoir. It's like
Mm.
still it's here, but just in like tiny truncated versions. And I have less of a knowledge of what these lines mean than my memoir, which is weird because in memoir, you do actually have to reflect and say the thing, like what the self was thinking then. And here in a poem, you don't have to say anything really. I do feel drawn to that quote unquote wayward self or that little back to Dickinson, my little force explodes. I feel like when I write poems like this, like that's how it feels. My little force explodes. I don't even know what is happening to me. And yes, I try to quote unquote organize in terms of craft. Certainly, craft is all I have. It's like craft is like the tiny little, like the bare piece of wood I'm dangling an ocean on. It's like, okay, craft, please help me with enjambment and all these like sounds. I can hold on to it, but I'm still submerged emotionally. Like
Mm.
I can't understand my poem. I have no idea. That's the part of the joy of writing it. I would never want to write a poem I actually understands. Like that doesn't make sense to me. But I am grateful for craft, thank goodness, because like I don't know, I'd be floating off like and like an astronaut like without like its spaceship tether if I actually didn't have craft.
Wow. Well, I mean, I wanted to ask you a bit about sort of a literary heritage. Who are your go-tos,
Mm.
and how does your past and these people of the past act on your writing or your art?
Mhm. Oh my gosh, there's so many poets. Poets create like a chorus for me. Like they're
Mm.
always singing together in my brain, not necessarily harmonically, but there's a lot of cacophony there for sure. But the poets I think I always return to, I mean, I think Lucille Clifton has been a poet that I can't, every single time I read a Clifton poem, I'm bewildered. And sometimes her poems are so short, I feel like I have to read it like 100 times and it still stuns me. Oftentimes a volta or like a turn towards the end, or sometimes even right in the middle, where I feel kind of like, oh, like it feels like a breath has been knocked out of me. And I think I saw an interview with, with her once where she says that she writes because of questions and the lack of answers. Like she's
Mm-hmm.
just won't just celebrate with me. Like that poem, how it ends. But I just every single time I'm like, whoa, I just feel like I have that response.
It'll be in the show notes for people. It'll be in the show notes.
Yay, yes, yes, please. The poem knows something that she doesn't know quite yet. And so I love that. I can feel that she feels that. I think also like even thinking about my own kind of Asian American literary lineage too, I'm always intrigued by writers who are quote unquote wayward. Teresa Hawkins Cha, I mean, she's like iconic. Like she died so she was like 31. I mean, she was murdered. I mean, it was a horrible, violent death. And I think about what she could have created. I think about, that book Dictate, when I first encountered it, I didn't know what to do with it. Literally, I don't know how to read it. And I think there was something about the fact that I didn't know what to do with it that made me feel so akin to her. And the fact that she was also a interdisciplinary artist. She was doing performances, visual art, book arts, like you name it. I find myself struggling to even name the things that I make and do because I am a poet who like will want to, and I did cook and eat my own poem. I find a lot of kinship with Teresa Hakon Cha because she didn't necessarily even have a form to call something poetry or not. But I feel like I am always drawn to poets and writers and makers who, yeah, are definitely very strange and see bewilderment as a means of demanding change and demanding voice. But it is really trying to enact some sort of more possible future. That's what I dream about, I think, as a poet and
Mm-hmm.
whatever the other things I do, paper making and yeah, poetry, sculptures, who knows?
Poetry sculptures. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you which of your poems you cooked and ate.
Oh, a poem called The Long Labors. It is my second book. It is very long because it's about labor. So obviously, you can't have a short poem about labor. One thing I thought was frustrating about when I was writing this poem, it felt too dense. Like I almost felt like I wanted to do something with my hands with that poem. And I grew up in a restaurant, and so literally the labor hands, like I grew up folding my mom's dumplings and wontons for the customers, and I so badly wanted to speak to my mom's physical labor. It's that poem's about matrilineal labor and literal labor, like giving birth to me, etc. But my mom always tells me, "Oh, I like the like rings that you have, but I can't wear rings. I've got worker hands." And so I was frustrated that this poem was about labor and not through labor. And so I basically cut up a bunch of words out of rice paper sheets. And then I folded all the words from that poem into my mom's dumpling mix, right? And then I made so many dumplings, like muscle memory, like my hands were hurting. And because it usually when you do that, you do it with a bunch of women in your family. And it was just me. It was actually during a pandemic. So
Okay.
it was just me folding these dumplings. The performance piece was shown at the Richmond Art Gallery in Richmond, BC. Yeah, it exists online. I can like link it to you as well. I just wanted to acknowledge the labor of my mother, my grandmother, like my aunties, just yeah, that matrilineal labor and the people who literally cook and nourish you all the time. And it felt better certainly to do that than just have the poem be a poem just sitting on my computer as a Word doc.
Do you consider a lot of your art or poetry to be in the category of rebellion? I'm interested in community and tradition and history and where those things support us and where those things squelch us. You know, your poem very much speaks to that topic.
Wow. I mean, I definitely think so in some ways. I think a lot about resistance. Rebellion is an interesting word. I feels like it's slightly different from resistance. I think resistance to me feels a little more communal than rebellion.
Mm.
For some reasons, I feel more cozy, comfortable, I think being quote unquote rebellious or resistant with other people. Like I also teach Asian American studies. And so there is this, yeah, long lineage, I think, of resistance I come from and a part of, I think, with a lot of my friends who are also Asian American poets that I feel like a lot of these themes or questions that I write through, it's not just me. And so, in that way, yes. But also personally, too, just in terms of my own little weird self, Jane Wong writes about blank, 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 blank. And whenever I see that happening, I'm like, I guess so. But there's more than that. You know, there is a spillage, there's a resistance even against categorization of what or who I am, I think, as a poet and a maker. Because I'm writing fiction right now and I'm writing like bizarro horror, you know, and I'm like, I'm always doing something a little strange to my own self. I always want to feel bewildered. That feels rebellious in some ways, that I just can't sit still, even in genre. Like I find it very uncomfortable,
Mm.
actually. I love making things. I know this is audio, but I have to show you my giant persimmon that I made.
Ah!
Like I just love ceramics too. And all ceramics that are closed forms need to be hollow. And so sometimes I put poems inside of these fruits that I make and it burns in a kiln. And only I know that the poem has burnt away. But to me, it's like ritualistic. No one will know or doesn't, you can't see it, but I can feel it. I do stuff like this, and I don't know what it means, or I'm not trying to publish a ceramic persimmon or sell it. I don't do that, but I think it will teach me something I don't know by doing something that I've never done before.
Mm.
It's fun to be rebellious. It's necessary to resist. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I love it. I love it. I didn't ask you when you were introduced to Dickinson or how, and how you have interacted with her outside of an academic classroom.
Ooh, this is such a good question. I mean, I definitely discovered her through an academic situation, which was a class when I was in college. So I do remember that. And I remember the giant collected, and I used to treat it like almost like tarot cards or something. Like I would just open a random page and I would read a line, and that would be my line for the day and my energy for the day.
There was a lot of occult stuff going on in her time. Yeah.
I use it as a kind of like way to enter the day, so to
Hmm.
speak. Yeah.
As a kind
Yeah.
of melody or witchcraft.
Yes,
I
exactly.
knew it. How did I know?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Jane Wong, thank you so much. This has been really delightful to get to talk to you.
Oh my gosh, it was such a joy, Catherine. I really appreciate your questions and the kind of little avenues that we went down today due to Emily Dickinson. I feel like she would appreciate, I think, some of the strange twists and turns that we took.
Well, thanks for being with us today for Melody or Witchcraft. You can find out more about today's guest by going to janewongwriter.com. That surname is Wong. Our theme music is by Emma Wallace. For complete show notes and photos, listen through the links at melodyorwitchcraft.com. You can also find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and elsewhere. Regardless of where you listen, support us by commenting, liking, reposting, recommending. We'd love to hear from you.